Hi everyone, welcome back, and in this video I'll be giving you some information on backlog grooming. So if you're a business analyst, a product owner, product manager, then definitely this is something that we need to do and we keep doing on a regular basis. So in this video I'll be giving you some information on what is backlog grooming, why groom a backlog and how is it done, who is responsible for it, and who might be involved in this particular process. So without any further delay, let's get into it. So, what is backlog grooming? So, it is one of the agile sessions, something similar to what you have Scrum, you have retros, all these are sessions. So, grooming is also another session in agile where the product manager, product owner, business analyst, along with other team members. Now, this needn't be the entire team. If it's a huge team, usually it will be too much of opinions. At that time, you can include only the key members of the team. So, along with the team members, the product owner, business analyst, or the manager tries to organize, clean, and refine backlog items so that the items are ready for at least the next 2 to 3 sprints that's coming ahead. Okay, so the main objective of this is, or what you try to do in backlog grooming is, you organize, clean, and refine backlog items. So this was an image that I took online on Google, and if you see over here, you can see two images. One is of neatly arranged, notes, and the other image is of things that are very disorganized and just not well refined, and it's not appealing. So this is how you ought to have a backlog. You need to have your backlog well organized, clean, and refined instead of having too many items in the backlog, and then you won't be able to plan ahead for your next sprints. So, moving on, what is done during a backlog grooming session? So, this is an example of a backlog. You have few items, which is, let's say you have an item of or user story of a product catalog, add products to cart, payment, and wish list. So, in backlog grooming sessions, what should be or what is done is, first thing, maybe probably you might have to split user stories. So when you get requirements from clients or stakeholders, the very first thing that you do is you just jot that user story down into your backlog. But you need to, when you do this backlog grooming, you need to check whether that's a smart requirement, okay, or the smart user story. So if it's going to be too large, then you might have to split the user story down into the required number of stories. And similarly, if in contrast, if you have too many user stories that might relate to the same functionality, then you might want to merge user stories. So I've taken a video on how do you split and merge user stories, and I'll add the link in the description box. So if you want to take a look at that, you can do it. And the next thing that you can do or can be done in backlog grooming sessions is you create tasks for user stories. So now once you know that you have user stories, sometimes it might come at the top of your head, or when you're discussing with your team members, there might be certain tasks or other similar stories that need to be played in order to accomplish a particular user story. So at that time, you can create tasks or other user stories parallelly during this session. The next one is explain the user stories to all team members for alignment. So the main important objective of this backlog grooming is, it's not only just cleaning and refining your backlog, but the entire team also needs to be aligned with what is pending in the backlog, what is expected to be the outcome, or what are all the different backlog items that are in line and need to be taken into development. The team needs to have an idea also of what are the backlog items. So in that case, it's the key responsibility of either the product owner, the manager, or a business analyst to explain. It needn't be a very detailed explanation. Maybe you have to just tell the people or tell your team members what that particular user story is, and maybe what value needs to be provided through that user story. Okay, so that everyone in your team is aligned and no one is missing out on certain backlog items or what could be the requirements in line. So that's one key thing. The next one is define the criteria for ready for development for each all user stories. Now, you have backlog items, but ultimately items are not going to stay in your backlog. You're going to move items from backlogs into your the sprints and in your boards. So you'll be moving them through lanes. Maybe it's going to be from backlog, you're going to take it ready for the sprint, and then you're going to move it to the sprint. Once it's in the sprint, maybe you have to do an analysis. So from the business analyst or the product owner end, you have to do analysis, and once that analysis is fully done, and maybe if the design is ready, then you have to push it or mark it as ready for development. So for every user story, sometimes teams might have generic ready for development criterias. Sometimes it can be for individual user stories. So whatever be the situation, whether you need to define it for each user story or for all cards, you need to sit and define what is the criteria to say that a user story is ready for development. So examples of that can be, if you want to say that, let's say this particular user story, add product to a cart. If you want to say that this is ready for development, then maybe you should have the, depending on what the team has finalized, sometimes it might come up to a conclusion saying that the business rules should be defined. Then you, the design of adding products to a cart, the UI, that also needs to be in place. The different test criterias, acceptance criterias. So all this need to be put in place only for a cart to be marked as ready for development. So this is something also during backlog grooming sessions teams can discuss and finalize on. The next one is prioritizing user stories. Now this is also very very important. So you have a big chunk of backlog items. So the main thing is, once you have split, refined your user stories and organized them, you need to prioritize these user stories, because the aim is, why are you doing this particular activity is for to make the user stories in your backlog ready for development, or to pick them up in the forthcoming at least 2 to 3 sprints that are ahead. So only when you know what items you need to prioritize, only then you would be able to move the prioritized items to your sprints or your initiatives. So prioritizing the user stories is very important. So when you prioritize these backlog items, usually all the items with high priorities, it would be moved up to your backlog, whereas the ones which are of average or medium or low priority, it would be furthermore down. So always in your backlog, the items that are on the top would be the items that are of high priority, and they would generally be items that are almost well refined. When you move downwards, you would find that slowly the priority keeps decreasing, and also even sometimes the vagueness also increases, because it's all for later stage, so you won't be doing much of an analysis on those user stories. But the analysis that you would be doing, the information that you would be collecting and gathering, would be more for the cards and the user stories that are of high priority and at the top of your backlog. The last one is estimate the story points for user stories. So this sometimes is done but not always. So sometimes the team takes up this as an opportunity to give a high level estimate of what could be the probable story points that can be assigned to user stories in the backlog. So it is at this time, but it's not always. This is done during a backlog grooming session. So this is about what is backlog grooming and what are all the different activities that are done in a backlog grooming session. And I've also mentioned that the responsibility is going to be the business analyst, the product owner, or it's going to be the product manager. Sometimes it's the scrum masters or the iteration managers that take up this responsibility, and they are accountable for this grooming session. But most of the time it belongs to the product owner, the manager, or business analyst. And the others who are involved in this backlog grooming session would be the mainly the product owners, the scrum masters, the iteration manager. You would have the key developers, the team leaders, and also the quality analysts also will be involved in this backlog grooming session. So always when you're going in for, before going in for a backlog grooming session, make sure that you communicate or you speak to your stakeholders, understand what are all their priorities, Also, you need to find out ahead whether all required team members will be present for the meeting. Organize your thoughts, do a little bit of um, little bit of refining on your end so that you don't go and get confused during the backlog grooming session. Be clear on your end. Also send out email notifications or notify the teams ahead of this grooming session so that everyone would be prepared. So this can be done depending on the team's availability and their type of a working or the team's operations. So usually you can do it twice a week, you can do it once in every 2 weeks, it can be done maybe every week, or you want to do it 3 or 4 times a month. So it depends on the team and how you want to, or how is your backlog. If it's going to be huge, then you have to do it little frequently and keep refining it, but it totally depends on each team's style and the backlog items, the count of the backlog items. So usually this meeting, it can go up to maybe half an hour or 1 hour or more. This also purely depends on the team and how much backlog items are there to discuss and to refine and to clean up. So 1 hour, it might be quite long if you think of it now, but when you get into the discussions and when you really get into the integrities of it, it would actually go very fast. So but always keep in mind, it's good to do this backlog grooming. It would create a very neat organization of all your backlog items, and when you want to plan out for your next iterations, for your next initiatives, you're going to have a well refined backlog so that it would be easy for your planning and for your strategizing also. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If you found this helpful and useful, please do give this a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.